Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be a June wrap-up and I'm so excited because I've read 8 books, which is the second best month that I've had so far this year. I read a ton of great books, some of which made me cry, which is saying a lot because I don't usually cry during books. So that says a lot about the month that I've had. So without further ado, let's just get into the books that I've read. The first book that I read this month was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you don't know what this book is about, it's basically about a hobbit, and hobbits are these small creatures who are kind of like humans, except they're really good at hiding and they're very quiet people. Hobbits also prefer to have very comfortable and cozy lives. Bilbo Baggins is a hobbit, and one day a wizard named Gandalf asked him to go on an adventure with him and a bunch of dwarves to save their kingdom from a dragon named Smaug. It was a really heartwarming story about Bilbo coming out of his cozy little home and experiencing adventure for the first time, and also making really great friendships with Gandalf and the dwarves. Bilbo is kind of like me, totally lazy, kind of reluctant to go on this adventure because that would mean leaving the comfort of his own home. The world was super detailed and I was completely immersed in this world, so I can see why a lot of people love this story and like the Lord of the Rings and stuff, and I'm so glad I read it because it was such an entertaining read. I feel like if I ever read it again, it'll be like a nice, easy, comforting read, and because of that, I'm rating it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho. This book is about a young girl who notices that her eyes are different from the rest of her classmates, but she also notices that her eyes are the same as her mother's, her grandmother's, and her sister's, and she learns to appreciate the heritage that comes with having this set of eyes. From the very beginning, this book made me cry. Instantaneously, I just started bawling just reading this book, even though it's literally a children's book. This is something that I just wish I had when I was a kid, especially a kid growing up in America or like in areas where there's a lot of people who don't look like me. The illustrations in this book are just so gorgeous, and I highly recommend this book to literally anyone. Even if you don't have a kid, I think you should read this book. Even if you aren't Asian, you should read this book because it helps kids to learn to appreciate people for their differences. So I rated this one a 5 out of 5 stars because of that. The next few books that I read were for my Pride 24-hour readathon that I did in a trailer, and I already have a video for that. So if you have time, please go check that out because I give a little bit more of my thoughts on each and every single one of these books. But the first book that I read during this readathon was The Black Flamingo by Dean Addie. This book is about Michael, who is a mixed race gay teen living in London, and he deals with issues of identity and where he fits into the grand scheme of things. Then when he goes to university, he sort of finds his place within the drag society. What really stuck out to me in this book was the support that he had from his friends and family. Although he struggled with coming to terms with his identity, it really helped that he had that group of people to be there for him. Since this book was written in like a lyrical style, it had to be written in such a way that you had to explain things in fewer words than what other novels would. I think because of that, there were a lot of scenes in which the love and kindness that Michael received was either unspoken or just understood. And it was just really nice to read about his whole transformation from being unsure of who he is into the Black Flamingo who knows exactly who he is and accepts every aspect of himself. And he gives a performance in the final chapters that is just really satisfying to see this whole transformation. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read during that readathon was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. In this book, there is a service called Deathcast, which calls you like right after midnight and tells you that you're going to die within the next 24 hours. Mateo and Rufus are 2 such people who have received this call, and unfortunately they don't have anyone to spend the rest of their day with, so they log on to an app called The Last Friend and they find each other on this app, and basically it's just them 2 spending their last day on Earth together. They start off as total strangers and their friendship just blossoms into something more. First of all, this book is now one of my absolute favorites. I thought the plot of the story was so interesting and very tragic. The characters in this book, they talk exactly how I would imagine teenagers talk. I mean, I've been a teenager before, but I don't know how they talk now. The dynamic between Mateo and Rufus was so wholesome to me. Even though they were complete opposites, I think the progression from them being complete strangers into them being friends is just like so natural, and it was just really nice to read about it. Books like this really make you want to live life to the fullest, and I feel like that's kind of self-explanatory. But another message that I kind of got from this book was to not judge people from having a different life than you. Oh, and also this was the second book that I cried during, so 5 out of 5 stars for this one. The next book that I read during that readathon was Heartstopper Volume 1, and oh my gosh, this book was so cute. This book is about Charlie Spring and Nick Nelson, who go to an all-boys school. They sit next to each other during class and they become friends, and even something more than that. Charlie is openly gay in the school, but Nick is kind of questioning his sexuality after he develops a crush on Charlie. The illustrations in this book were so cute, and I feel like their friendship is just so cute. Charlie is kind of like an overthinker, but Nick is just like very soft-hearted and just like so nice to Charlie. It's very heartwarming to read about. Nick is such a supportive friend, and I just love that about this book. You can tell from this book and from They Both Die at the End that I just really love love stories that begin as friendships. So this book gets another 5 out of 5 stars. And then the last book that I read during that Pride readathon was Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. This book is about a trans boy named Felix who wants to be just treated normally. However, one day while he's in school, somebody posts pictures of him before he transitioned and even writes down his dead name underneath the pictures for the whole school to see. And the story is about him trying to get revenge on who did this to him, or at least who he thinks did this to him. And then it's also him trying to fall in love for the first time because he's never been in love before. This book had a lot of conversations that I kind of wish I had read about when I was in high school. I feel like when I was in high school, I didn't really know how to communicate with my friends very well. Because of that, I hurt a lot of people and would not realize the mistakes I was making. So it was really nice to read about Felix and his friends who made mistakes, but then they would recognize those mistakes and own up to those mistakes and apologize for them. And then there's also a lot of conversations here about not being sure about his identity, because even though Felix is a trans boy, he's already transitioned, he still kind of questions his gender identity. And this book kind of tells people that it's okay to be unsure of who you are just yet. So I rated this book a 4 out of 5 stars, and I feel like I should come back to this book sometime because of the readathon. It made me go through it a little bit too fast, and I just think I should take a little bit more time to absorb what was in this book. After that, I read Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. It's about this girl named Lila Macapagal, and she's a Filipino-American woman who unfortunately catches her fiance cheating on her. So she moves from Chicago back to her hometown in Shady Palms to help her aunt and her failing restaurant. One day, her ex-boyfriend, and this is not the same boyfriend that she broke up with in Chicago, he comes into the restaurant and they get into an argument while she's serving him food. Unfortunately, he drops dead at that very moment, so she has to clear her name and save the restaurant by solving his murder. And in the process, she visits other restaurants to see if they have any involvement in his death. This book centers around food and Filipino culture, which I feel like go hand in hand. As a Filipino, I can wholeheartedly agree that these two are intertwined, especially from the region that my family comes from, which is Pampanga, which is known for food. Every time my family and I are together, we're always talking about food. We're always talking about the best restaurants in town. So I think this book is a really great representation of how Filipino people love food. It was so comforting to read about all of the delicious food in this book, and it's not just Filipino food. They also have Japanese food, Mexican food, and there's just a bunch of different restaurants that she visits, and she tries the food in there. So there's really great descriptions of all the restaurants that she visits. The book for me was a little bit cheesy at some parts, but what was most important to me was the mystery aspect of it. Towards the ending, when it revealed who the murderer was, I did put everything together. It was like right before the murderer was actually revealed that I ended up putting everything together and figured it out who it was. So I think this book did a really good job of giving out the clues a little by little until the very end when it all came together. I think this book is just a really fun read, and I feel like everyone should read it because a book by a Filipino author is about Filipino culture. I'm Filipino, so definitely read it. And I rated this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Last but certainly not least, I finally finished reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And If you watched one of my vlogs on this book, I give a lot of detail about what my thoughts are on this book. So if you haven't watched that yet, I highly suggest that you watch it because I feel like a lot of the thoughts that I had were very profound and just big brain thoughts, you know? If you don't know what this book is about, it's about Addie LaRue, who is given immortality by a god of darkness, but he also curses her to be forgotten by everyone she meets. But that doesn't stop her from living her life to the fullest, even though she's doomed to be alone forever. I feel like this book is my favorite book of all time now because this book kind of represents like who I am as a person. First off, I really love stories that have anything to do with immortality because I just think that is really interesting. But it also talks about two really big fears that I have and that Addie LaRue has in the book. The first of which is that she's just afraid of spending her life the same way as everybody else. And then the second thing is that she really fears not being able to make a mark on the world, which is something that I have a huge fear of as well. I won't get into too much detail about this because I do talk a lot about it in that one video, but basically this book is just a really great story about the fears that I have and how they manifest in somebody's life when they're forced to live life alone. This is the third book that I cried during, so 5 out of 5 stars for that one. So that is it for all of the books that I've read this month. Like I said, I read 8 books, which is so crazy to me. I thought I was a slow reader, but I guess I'm not. 3 of these books are some of my new favorites of all time. So it's safe to say I had a really good reading month, and I'm really excited what July will bring. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up because that helps me out so much. If you read any of these books, if you have thoughts, opinions, feedback, anything, leave a comment down below. Subscribe because I post new videos twice a week, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified every time I upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!